Thousands of years ago, in the heart of ancient Mesopotamia, stood a temple like no other. Its towering presence dominated the city of Babylon, its bricks baked hard under the relentless Mesopotamian sun. Within its cool shadows toiled men, women and children, all held captive as slaves by the priests who ran the place. Their days were spent in backbreaking labor, baking bread, grinding grain, and cleaning temples. But they weren't allowed to sleep with both eyes closed. Why? Let's find out in today's episode of Time Ghost. Time 12. In the belly of the ziggurat, your quarters reek of stale sweat and sour urine. You press your back against the cold mud brick wall, trying to ignore the throbbing pain in your legs and arms. It's been a long day of mixing plaster, smoothing marble columns, and polishing huge statues of gods with rancid animal fat. Still, the temple must be immaculate for tomorrow's festival honoring Ishtar, the goddess of love and war. And you are just one of hundreds of slaves pressed into service for this monumental task. As the last sliver of daylight disappears beyond the horizon, you sit alone on your rough woven mat, too tired to fight the sleep that pulls at your eyelids. But you can't afford to let go completely. Not here, not ever. You remember the price of disobedience all too well. The cruel laughter of the priests as they whipped another slave for falling asleep on the job. So you keep one eye open, watching the flickering shadows cast by the oil lamp hanging from the ceiling. Every creak of the ancient timbers, every cough from the neighboring mats makes you jump. Even in sleep, your dreams bring no respite. Here in Edamananki, the house of the foundation of heaven, even dreams could be dangerous. You know the stories. Some poor soul dozing off in the corner, dreaming of freedom, perhaps, or maybe just a life before slavery. When they wake up, they're found dead, their bodies contorted as if in pain. No marks, no wounds, but their life force is gone, leaving their body husks drained of all vitality. The priests claim it's a curse, punishment from the gods for daring to dream of escape. Others whisper that the temple itself drinks the dreams of its prisoners, keeping them weak and compliant. Whatever the truth, you dare not risk it. You stare straight ahead, refusing to close the one eye that God has left you. Hours pass. The sound of snores rises and falls around you, punctuated by sudden coughs and muttered prayers. Outside, the wind shifts, bringing the scent of rain. You shiver, pulling your thin cloak tighter around your shoulders. The old linen is full of holes, but it's better than nothing. For a moment, you consider asking for more. The overseer might take pity on you, or maybe he won't, but what choice do you have? The night grows colder, and you're already shivering in your filth rags. A small fire would be nice, but even that is forbidden. If the priests catch you warming yourself near an open flame, they'll brand you a rebel, and worse. The first rays of sunlight slant through cracks in the walls, rousing you from your vigil. You rub your gritty eyes, thankful for the distraction of dawn. At least now you can see clearly. Maybe today will be different. Maybe today you'll earn the overseer's favor or avoid the priest's notice altogether. As you rise, you straighten your coarse tunic and gather up your tools for another day of work. Your stomach growls, reminding you that breakfast consists only of stale bread dipped in sour milk. You don't bother brushing the crumbs off your tunic. What's the point? They'll only fall on more grime and dirt. There's nothing to gain by trying harder here. Life for a slave is hard and dangerous, but some are worse than others. You make your way through the bustling crowds toward the granary where sacks of grain are piled high. Children as young as 7 pick through the kernels, discarding weed seeds and the bodies of small insects. One boy yawns, accidentally dropping a handful of grain. His reward is a sharp cuff to the ear from the overseer standing nearby. The man's face is weathered and scarred, his eyes as cold and empty as polished stones. He carries a tally stick, and with each measured stroke, another unit of grain is removed for the temple stores. Around you, the other children work ceaselessly, their small hands moving quickly to obey the overseer's watchful gaze. After a morning of winnowing grain, you move on to the next task, preparing dough for the loaves of bread baked in the temple kitchens. You knead and pound the stiff dough, trying to make it smooth and elastic. Your knuckles ache from pounding the dough, and you secretly hope that the baker won't notice if you cut your hands. Fresh cuts mean new bandages, which means a reprieve from the chafing of the old ones. You look up as footsteps approach. The priest is coming. You know him well enough to recognize his sandals slapping against the stone floor. His shadow falls across your work area. He's in a good mood today. You can tell from the set of his shoulders, the way he hums a tuneless song as he walks. That means an extra helping of bread dough for you, meant to ensure that the loaves baked tonight will be perfect for the festival. When the dough is finally ready, you roll it out into thin sheets, flatten it further with your bare arms, and trim away the excess dough. Then you lay the sheets on hot stones where they bake into flat cakes. Afterwards, you brush the cakes with oil and sprinkle them with salt. The smell of baking bread mixes with the tang of vinegar in the air. You try not to think about how much you'd like to eat one of the cakes, warm and fresh from the oven, but stealing is a punishable offense. Hunger pangs forgotten, you stack the loaves neatly on trays and cover them with cloths until it's time to deliver them to the kitchens. Throughout the day, you hear the screams of men being flogged at the whipping post. Those unfortunate enough to incur the priest's wrath are punished severely. At least the screams are muffled, so you can pretend they're just shouts of anger rather than cries of pain. The thought of earning the priest's favor is enough to keep you working diligently throughout the afternoon. Finally, as the light begins to fade, you are dismissed from the kitchen and allowed to return to your quarters. You eat a crust of bread dipped in sour milk while sitting on your mat. It tastes like ashes in your mouth. You wish you had something sweet to eat, but there's no fruit or honey here. Only the coarsest grains and vegetables are brought into the temple kitchens. After eating, you wash your hands and face in a basin of cold water. It does little to remove the grime of the day, but it feels nice nonetheless. The water is shared by all the slaves in your quarters. Tonight, the temple celebrates the goddess Ishtar. The cooks will burn incense and sacrifice animals. The priests will chant and dance, and you will watch from the shadows, unseen, unheard. Your cramped quarters offer no respite from the sounds of celebration. Drums and flutes echo from the courtyard, mingling with the screams of pigs being led to the slaughter. You lie down on your mat, pulling your threadbare cloak over your head. Sleep is your only escape, but you know even that is treacherous ground. So you stare at the darkness beyond the hole in the wall, willing your eyelids to droop. The rhythmic chanting from the courtyard grows louder, then softer, slowly fading into the night, along with the rest of the sounds of celebration. You can still hear the low murmur of voices in the corridor outside your quarters. You strain to listen, hearing snatches of conversation, gossip about the temple, the city, the latest atrocities committed by the priests. You wonder if they talk about you, if they ever will. You know you've been here long enough to become a name, a face, a number. But have they ever looked at you, really looked at you? Do any of them know your name? Do you have one? You curled tighter on your mat, trying to shut out the world and the whispers that haunt its edges. It's safer this way, you tell yourself. Just don't fall asleep. Don't close your eyes. Never close your eyes. And on that note, today's episode comes to an end. Thank you all so much for joining me today. And a special thanks to our supporters, whose names you can see on screen right now. If you want to see your name on the screen too, join our membership program today. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button, because when you do, the algorithm rewards us by recommending our videos to more history lovers like you. The night is hot and heavy with the scent of stale waste and unwashed bodies. The air hangs thick with the buzzing of insects and the distant calls of nocturnal predators. You lie on your straw sleeping mat in the temple slave barracks, unable to sleep, unable to rest. You toss and turn, the stench of sour sweat clinging to you, and the rancid fat used to polish the many statues within the temple permeating your nostrils. You can hear the rhythmic chants of the priests from their moonlit rituals somewhere above you. And then there's the crunch of gravel underfoot and hushed voices coming from the entrance hall. Each creak and whisper stirring you from your fitful slumber, reminding you that even in the darkness, you are never truly alone. You curl tighter, pulling your threadbare cloak over your face, willing yourself to sleep, to dream, to escape for just a few precious hours from this life of toil and misery. But you keep one eye open, always one eye open, for in Enemananke, the house of the foundation of heaven, even dreams could be dangerous. Welcome back, my loyal viewers. Tonight we bring you another exciting episode of Tales of the Ancient World. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already so that you never miss an upload. And don't forget to like, comment, and share. Your engagement really helps us out. Tonight's story comes from ancient Mesopotamia. Our tale begins in the great city of Babylon, a metropolis famed for its wealth, its luxury, and its many, many temples. Among these places of worship, none was more revered than the Temple of Marduk, the patron deity of Babylon. This magnificent structure was known as Enemananke, the house of the foundation of heaven. It was said that the gods themselves descended from the heavens through this very temple, making it the nexus of the cosmos. Within its hallowed halls, Marduk, the mighty warrior god, received daily worship, his colossal statue adorned with fresh flowers and precious incense. But the construction and maintenance of such a grand edifice required a massive workforce. Thousands of laborers, artisans, priests, and slaves toiled ceaselessly to keep the temple's many rituals and ceremonies running smoothly. Among them were a group of men who bore the brunt of the heaviest labor. They were the temple slaves, condemned to a life of backbreaking work and utter exhaustion. Their days were spent hauling massive blocks of stone, mixing mortar, plastering walls, cleaning floors, polishing statues, and performing menial tasks to keep the temple complex in pristine condition. Evenings were no better. As they slept fitfully in crowded barracks, the echoes of chanting priests and the ever-present fear of the temple guards kept them from true rest. Many of these slaves were prisoners of war, captured during one of Babylon's many military campaigns. Others were born into slavery, their status passed down from their parents and grandparents. Regardless of how they came to be enslaved, all shared one thing in common: a life of servitude without hope of freedom. One of these slaves was a young man named Kaduru. Kaduru had been a free farmer in his village until his fields were seized by Babylonian tax collectors. Desperate to save his family from a life of destitution, he offered himself up as a slave to the temple, hoping that his skills as an agricultural worker would be useful there. However, He soon learned that his talents were wasted on menial tasks, and the overseer saw any attempt at efficiency as nothing more than laziness. As months turned into years, Kuduru grew increasingly disillusioned with his lot in life. He missed his family, his friends, his freedom, and most of all, he missed his wife. When he first arrived at the temple, he was allowed brief visits home every couple of months. But as time went on, those visits became less and less frequent. Now he hadn't seen his family in nearly 2 years and didn't know if he ever would again. The other slaves were just as unhappy as Kuduru, though some had managed to find small ways to cope with their situation. Many found solace in music, singing mournful songs of lost love or heroic deeds from the past. Others took up gambling, betting on the outcome of fights between rats or throwing dice for handfuls of barley. Still, others sought comfort in drink, brewing illicit beer from stolen grain and sneaking into the reed marshes at night to get drunk on fermented marsh wine. Kuduru, however, found no joy in these distractions. Instead, he spent his nights lying on his mat in the barracks, staring listlessly at the cracked ceiling, too miserable to sleep. His mind raced, replaying memories of his former life and imagining what might become of him if he remained in the temple for too long. For he knew from personal experience that slavery in Babylon was a death sentence. No slave ever left the temple without having given up their life force. Either they died of exhaustion, malnutrition, or old age, or they sold their souls to dark spirits to gain powers that could ensure their survival, thus becoming a member of the dreaded Order of the Crooked Path. With so much peril lying in wait in the dream realm, it was considered safest to sleep with one eye open, always one eye open. In this way, one could ward off any evil spirits that might try to slip into their minds, keeping themselves and their families safe from harm. Such was the case with Kuduru. Though he longed for sleep, for oblivion, he kept one eye open, always one eye open, staring blankly ahead as the night wore on. Then suddenly, his eye caught something moving in the shadows across the room. At first, he thought it was a stray dog, a jackal, perhaps even a hyena. But as the shape slowly came into view, he saw that it was humanoid, bipedal, walking up right on to legs. Kuduru blinked, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. Was he dreaming? Was this some hallucination brought on by malnutrition and exhaustion? He wasn't sure. As the figure approached, he could make out more details: the muscled arms and legs, the leathery wings folded against its back, the sharp beak and piercing yellow eyes. Fear froze Kuduru in place as the creature stood over him, tilting its head and letting out a harsh screech. Then it spoke, its voice raspy and guttural, and the words that followed sent shivers down Kuduru's spine. Before Kuduru could even utter a sound, the creature swooped down, its talons extended. And before he knew it, he was tumbling through the air, flying backwards, falling, plummeting towards the ground below. What fate awaits Kuduru now that he has been taken by a creature from beyond the stars? Will he rise to become a powerful sorcerer, or will he suffer a fate worse than death? Find out next week when we continue our tale. And if you're eager to see what perils await Kuduru in the next installment of Temple Slave, then be sure to check out our new channel. There you'll find exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, including bonus segments from each episode of Tales of the Ancient World. We've got a ton of material already uploaded, including behind-the-scenes peeks, blooper reels, and exclusive interviews with the people who bring tales of the ancient world to life. And we add new content every week. The year is 1750 BC. The region is ancient Mesopotamia. The ruler is a man named Hammurabi, and he wants us all to know how great he is. He has erected this giant stele, or stone pillar, to tell everyone who comes through this city just how awesome he is. And if you didn't believe me, there are these tiny little scenes all over this thing, showing him conquering all the other Mesopotamian city-states. Like this one, where he's taking tribute from some random city we've never heard of. Now, most of these scenes are too small to make out any details, but that doesn't matter, because there is one last scene here, at the very top of the stele, showing Hammurabi receiving the tribute of a defeated city. This one is so detailed, it even shows him what he's getting. See, in the center, there's a bunch of people bringing gifts to Hammurabi. And although we can't see their faces, we know who they are because they're kneeling down in front of the king, and you don't want to do that unless you want your face to be in the next scene. There are two things being presented to him. On the left, there's a bunch of lapis lazuli, which is a really nice blue stone that was mined hundreds of miles away and shipped over here by boat because Hammurabi liked it so much it was worth trading lots of silver for. And look how much they got. They must have done a ton of trading. On the right, though, they're also giving him something else, and that thing is more valuable than gems or gold. It is knowledge. These guys are giving him scribes, men trained in writing, who would have spent years learning the cuneiform script. Scribes were like the engineers of the ancient world, the ones who built the big projects, managed the king's finances, kept track of trade deals, and recorded history. It is said that one scribe could earn more than 30 times the salary of a regular worker. So when the king asked for scribes as a tribute, it meant that he had complete control of these cities. So now he's got a bunch of scribes. What does he do with them? Well, according to this carving, he puts them to work immediately. Look over there on the right. A scribe is already copying something onto a clay tablet. And if we squint our eyes, we can make out what he's writing. If a man destroys another's eye, his own eye shall be put out. You may think that that's a bit extreme, and if you did, you wouldn't be wrong. But this is exactly what made Hammurabi great. In fact, his empire was about to become so great that he needed a way to keep track of it all. First, let me explain why Hammurabi was so successful. Hammurabi was born into the royal family of Babylon. In those days, the Fertile Crescent was mostly divided up into independent city-states like Lagash, Kish, Umma, Uruk, Ur, Utu, and Larsa. Each of them controlled some farmland and some villages around a big ziggurat, or temple tower, ruled by a priest-king, a divine appointee who held court inside the temple and kept everything running smoothly. Hammurabi's dad was the king of Babylon, and when he died, Hammurabi took the throne. But not long after, he had to flee Babylon because his brother tried to kill him. Hammurabi was forced to find allies in other city-states to help him fight his way back home. He didn't want to just take Babylon back, though. He wanted more. As he traveled around the countryside, raising armies to fight his battles, he convinced the city's leaders to join him in a mission to conquer all of Mesopotamia and bring it under the rule of Babylon. For the next 12 years, Hammurabi fought to take over every single city-state. His goal was to create one single empire spanning the entire Fertile Crescent. That way, he could collect taxes on trade goods passing through his borders and rebuild Babylon into the biggest, most powerful city in the region. Hammurabi was pretty ruthless. While most kings would show mercy and keep the local rulers on as figureheads, Hammurabi wasn't interested in sharing power. He would completely destroy the old government and replace it with an official appointed by him. To make matters worse, he wasn't done fighting. Once he had total control of the Fertile Crescent, he turned his sights on the Hittites and the Mitanni Confederacy. For a total of 30 years, Hammurabi waged war across Western Asia until finally his health began to fail and he was forced to retire. But during his 30 years as king, he had taken over 28 cities and established Babylon as the center of the ancient world. It stretched from the Persian Gulf in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west, making it one of the largest empires ever seen up until that point. As a result, Hammurabi decided that he should document his victories for all eternity. You know, in case anyone ever doubted that he was, in fact, the greatest king in the history of the world. To solve this problem, he pulled together a bunch of scribes and told them to write down his accomplishments. Hammurabi wanted to brag about how many cities he had conquered, how many tributes he received, and how much wealth he took from each of them. This resulted in a list of 280 to different people who owed him money. There was Adama, who owed him 400 pieces of silver. There was Lagash, who owed him 600 pieces of silver and a whole bunch of gold. And there was Elam, who owed him 800 pieces of silver and 28 talents of gold. He was so proud of this list that he had it engraved on the walls of his temple. Just in case you couldn't already tell, he was really, really rich. And when you're really rich, you can buy really expensive things like a 10-ton block of gold. Yeah, that's about the size of a small car. He used this golden block to build a huge statue of Marduk, the patron deity of Babylon. The statue was placed inside the main temple of Marduk, and it became the center of religious life in the empire. Every year on the New Year celebration, Hammurabi would go to the temple and light incense at the base of the statue. Then he would walk around the room, stopping at each scene to check off all the cities he had conquered. He probably felt kinda bad when he got to the last one, though, because right there on the wall was a carving of him taking tribute from the city of Isin, but then he would remind himself that he was the king of Babylon, and Isin was just another city in his empire. And besides, he didn't have time to feel bad. He had a massive kingdom to run. You see, Hammurabi was a good administrator. He understood that a big part of his success was because he had a competent bureaucracy keeping everything running smoothly. He assigned judges to travel throughout the empire, settling disputes between merchants, making sure the roads stayed open, and collecting taxes on crops. He also required tax collectors to pay the same taxes on their crops as everyone else, regardless of how much money they had. He kept track of his revenue streams to make sure that every city in his empire was paying him what they owed. Hammurabi's shrewdness saved Babylon during droughts when there was no tax revenue coming in from farmers. He used his reserves to feed hungry citizens and maintained law and order throughout the empire. He also built irrigation systems to water farms and keep food prices low, and set up public granaries to distribute food in times of need. He even built roads connecting the furthest corners of his empire, which allowed for faster communication and trade between distant cities. One of these roads, paved with bricks stamped with his name, still exists today. If you ever visit Babylon, you can take a selfie on it to prove you were there. After 40 years of ruling, Hammurabi stepped down and passed the throne to his son. After he died, Babylon would go on to be the capital of the Neo-Babylonian Empire and the home of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, one of the ancient world's 7 wonders. His empire would eventually collapse, but his most famous creation would live on forever, the Code of Hammurabi, the first known collection of written laws. When Hammurabi first came to power, he noticed that there was no consistent way of settling arguments in court. Sometimes a judge might favor one side because they paid him a bribe. Other times, justice might be decided based on who had the best lawyer. He wanted to fix that, so he wrote down a series of laws that applied equally to all citizens, no matter how rich or poor they were. If someone broke the law, they would be punished accordingly. It didn't matter if you were a prince or a pauper, the punishment fit the crime. If you stole a donkey, you had to pay back double the value of that donkey. If you killed someone's son, you had to give them back another son. If you destroyed someone's eye, yours would be destroyed as well. Now, some of these laws seem pretty savage by today's standards, but they were actually a lot more humane than previous laws. Back in the days of the Code of Yernamu, it was perfectly fine to beat your wife as long as you didn't break any bones. Under Hammurabi's code, that would actually get you arrested. The Code of Hammurabi had such an impact on the region that it inspired the next state empires to make their own legal codes, eventually leading to the Magna Carta and the United States Constitution. In other words, Hammurabi was not only the greatest king in the history of the world, he was also one of the most influential. But I'll let you decide that for yourself. The stylus hesitates at the letters forming the words put out. The scribe from Mari thinks back over his shoulder to the burning city. To the men who died defending it, their flesh melting like butter in the Elamites' oven. To the women and children whose shrieks still echoed in his ears. But he cannot let those memories distract him now. This is his one chance to save himself and his city. So he writes down the words put out and signs them with the royal seal, giving them the weight of law. In Babylon, 200 miles away, King Hammurabi finishes his bath. Servants fan him. He pulls off his robe, revealing a toned body, the muscles etched with the strength of a warrior and the stamina of a long-distance runner. He ruled wisely and well for 42 years. In that time, he had defeated rival kings, crushed rebellions, made trade routes safe, and expanded his empire. His name struck fear into the hearts of his enemies and inspired confidence in his people. He was beloved by the masses, and history would remember him as one of the greatest kings of Babylon. But tonight, something is different. As he prepares for bed, his hand shakes. He dismisses his attendants so he can ponder this strange occurrence alone. It happens again. The king's hand trembles. Could he be sick? Is this the beginning of the end? Back in Mari, the message has arrived. The scribe reads it aloud to the governor. They stare at the writing for a moment in stunned silence. Then the governor asks, "Are you sure you read it right?" "I'm certain," replies the scribe. "The king has given us one chance to save ourselves and our city. For the past 2 years, they have been waiting for a sign from the gods, for an answer to their prayers. It's said that if they built a great ziggurat, a tower reaching the heavens, then the gods would listen to their pleas. But no matter how high they built, no matter how many sacrifices they made, the floods kept coming. The scribes had been hesitant to ask for divine favor because they knew the cost. Hammurabi had told them that when the gods are asked for help, they demand payment, sometimes in blood. But they were desperate. They needed water for crops, for drinking. Without it, they would die, so they began to build. And finally, the rains came. Relief flooded through the people. They celebrated in the streets, thanking the gods and cursing the Elamite king who had brought them so close to death. But not everyone was so carefree. At the palace, the king paced back and forth. Every few steps, he would stop, then continue pacing. It happened again. His hand trembled. Was he ill? He thought of all the times he had called for his physicians, how they would arrive, bow before him, examine his ailments, and leave. Every visit ended the same way, with the physicians bowing and promising to return the next day. And every night, he would lie awake wondering what was wrong with him. He had never been afraid of sickness before, but this was different. This was weakening him. One of the eunuchs watching the king took a step closer. "My lord," he said softly, "what troubles you?" Hammurabi turned to face him, his eyes dark. "There is treachery in my court," he said. "There is poison in my wine." The eunuch's eyes widened. "Who could be so bold?" he whispered. The king continued pacing. "They think I am too old to rule," he said. "They want to see my son on the throne. How else could someone poison me without me knowing it?" Then he stopped pacing and faced the eunuch. "Find the source of the poison," he commanded, "and bring them to me." The eunuch bowed. "Yes, my lord." He knew who had poisoned the king. It had been one of his co-conspirators. They wanted to usurp the throne. But why hadn't they finished the job? They had plenty of chances. The eunuch knew the answer, though. The conspirators were afraid to kill the king because the royal guard was loyal to Hammurabi. If they made a move, the guard would crush them. So they waited, hoping the king would die of natural causes. The eunuch left the palace and went to the house of the royal gardener. That was where the conspirators met. He entered the courtyard and found the men in the shade of a grape arbor. The leader of the group looked up and smiled when he saw the eunuch. "Come to join us," he said. "We were just talking about how you will serve in my administration." The eunuch did not respond. Instead, he drew his dagger. One of the men saw the blade flash and cried out. "The king," he whispered. "He knows." Before anyone could react, the eunuch plunged his dagger into the man's chest. Blood spurted out, staining the white walls red. The other conspirators drew their weapons, but it was too late. The royal guard arrived and cut them down one by one. The next day, the king held court. The assembled officials watched as he had the conspirators paraded before him. He wanted them to know the fate of traitors. When he was done, he dismissed the crowd. Only the scribe from Mari remained. Hammurabi motioned with his hand for the man to come closer. "You have saved your city," the king said. "Because of your obedience, the God of wisdom has granted me another chance to rule." The scribe bowed. "It was my duty, my lord." He dared to look up and saw a change in the king's eyes. There was no longer any fear or sadness there, only resolve burned brightly. The king continued, "Now I must punish the wicked." He handed the scribe a clay tablet. "Write these laws," he said. "Make them known throughout the land. Let the wicked tremble before the power of Hammurabi." The scribe took the tablet and hurried from the courtroom. As soon as he was alone, he threw the clay to the ground and stamped on it. "No," he whispered. "No, I won't do it." But deep down, he knew he had no choice. After the scribe left, Hammurabi sat in silence for a moment. Then he, too, got up and left the courtroom. He was eager to put his laws into action, eager to show his people that even the gods could be defied. In the courtyard outside the palace, Hammurabi addressed his generals. He spoke of the conspirators and the threat they had posed. Then he outlined his plans for dealing with those who opposed him. The generals listened intently, their faces grim. "If anyone should defy the king," Hammurabi said, "then let them know that the full force of the Babylonian army will be against them." The generals repeated after him, their voices echoing his words. When the king was done, the soldiers cheered and shouted for more war. Hammurabi raised a hand for silence. "We will take back everything that was stolen from us," he said. "We will make Babylon the greatest city in the world." The soldiers roared their approval. But as the celebrations continued, Hammurabi felt the familiar tremor in his hand. He ignored it, though. He knew what he had to do. First, he would crush the rebels, then he would restore order. After that, he could deal with the illness. Meanwhile, the scribe from Mari stood before the altar in the temple, reciting the newly written laws. The crowd of people listening intently to his words. Some nodded, others shook their heads. These laws were harsh, but they were fair. If a man beat his wife, he would receive 50 lashes. If a son struck his father, he would be put to death. If a thief broke into a house, he would be put to death. Ah, yes, this is it. This is the voice of the past. No, not that one. That's just the wind. This is the voice of the past speaking to us across all these centuries. In the quiet archives ... where sunlight slants through high windows ... we find the true heartbeat of Babylon. And what is that heartbeat? It is the pulse of human lives lived, loved, and lost in ancient Mesopotamia. For here among these clay tablets is a record of their joys and sorrows, their hopes and dreams, even their petty squabbles and shopping lists. And today, my friends, we get to be the first to hear them. You see, this is our third lesson in reading cuneiform, and I think by now you have got the hang of it. So let us dive right into these newly discovered tablets and see what they have to say. First up, we come across this little guy. Yes, that's right, it's tiny. It's no bigger than your palm. But oh, my goodness, what an important document it is. This, my dears, is a record of a bride's dowry. A dowry, you will recall, is the property that a father gives to his daughter on her marriage. And so the proud papa in this case has given her a number of things, so let's see what they are. We start with a mirror, a very humble gift, but still very much prized in those days. Then comes clothing, 3 tunics made out of wool. But then, oh, look, a jar of pomegranate wine. Ah, yes, that was a favorite Mesopotamian drink. I do believe I have mentioned it before, sweet like the taste of victory. And finally, there's some grain. Not as exciting, I know, but still an important provision for the young bride. And lastly, there's a little lump of gold, no more than a couple of ounces, but still, as they say, better than nothing. So the very first thing we learn from these intimate family records is that life here wasn't all beer and Skittles. Sometimes they had to work for a living, and it would seem that sometimes men were expected to make their own way in the world. Look at this next tablet. It is covered with a single line of writing, and yet how many stories it holds within it. Now, don't be alarmed by the length of this line. Most of it doesn't concern us, it is merely a list of names. They are the guarantors of a loan. That means if the man to whom they are attached should fail to repay his debt, then these men would have to pay it for him. So who is the unlucky debtor? Why, this fellow here, Shamsi-ad-Din. We can tell that he is the one because the scribe has written down his occupation. He is a male domestic, that is a male prostitute. Oh, yes, prostitution was widespread in Babylonia. These male prostitutes catered to the pleasures of both men and women. And no shame was attached to their profession, at least not in the same way as it was elsewhere. They were simply helping to keep society running smoothly. After all, the population of Babylon must have been pretty big, and one can imagine how difficult it would have been to raise a family in such a city. Prostitution, therefore, was encouraged. And since most of them were men, there was less pressure on women to engage in it. I must say, however, that this was a Babylonian view, and things were quite different in Israel. There, being a prostitute was considered a great sin. So let us now move away from this subject and turn our attention to something much more wholesome. Here is a school exercise, and look how proudly the scribe has written it out. Honor the gods, the great lords. Obey your elders. Yes, these were the sort of maxims that every schoolboy was expected to memorize. And this particular lad has done a fine job. His wedges are sharp and clear and precise. But then, my eyes, what is this? The teacher has taken a lump of clay and rubbed it into a ball. And when he has thrown it at the boy, it has left a small dent in the clay tablet. And that is how the teacher has marked the boy's errors. He has taken his wedges and stamped them into the clay in the shape of a beggar's teeth. How kind of him! And while we are talking about schoolboys, I have a little game I would like to play with you. Look at this fragment. Can you make out what is written there? Well, let me help you. The first word is schoolmaster or teacher. Next, we have boy, and after that, scribe. Still struggling. Let's try another. First we have scribe, then pupil, then scribe, and then pupil. Now I think I have got it. This is a little exercise for the pupils. The scribe is writing for the pupil. Am I right? Yes, that's perfect. You see, the whole idea behind the study of cuneiform was that scribes could write for other people who were too busy to do it themselves. Literacy was very important. I am afraid, however, that our next tablet was not produced in a school. It is the work of a professional, a real craftsman of the written word, for look how elegant this writing is. Each wedge is perfectly formed and each stroke is exactly in the right place. This is a masterpiece of calligraphy, but it is also a clever piece of salesmanship, for what does it say? It says, Elishama, son of Hanani, is putting up for sale his house and field, which belonged to his father. There is even a price on it. It used to sell for 20 shekels of silver, but now Elishama is having it for only 15 shekels. Now, why would anyone want to buy this place? Because it has a vineyard on it. Yes, I think you can pick out the grapevines in this illustration. And that makes this property very valuable indeed. But we are not done with the advertisements yet. This time it's a donkey that is for sale. A nice little female donkey, perhaps a bit old, but still good for plowing the fields. And over here is its price. Do you see the symbol of a crescent moon? That stands for 30 shekels of silver. And while we are on the subject of prices, have a look at this list. It is a table of weights and measures and prices. And though it might look a little confusing to us, it would have been very familiar to any Babylonian merchant. Let me read off some of these prices for you. 1 mina of wheat equals 45 shekels of silver. A mina of barley equals 30 shekels of silver. And 1 talent of silver equals 60 minas of silver. And notice that a talent is worth 100 shekels. There are even prices for precious stones. 1 Babylonian gold ring equals 6 shekels of silver. How do you like that? But it's time now to look at one more type of document. These are receipts. Now, you will recall from our previous lesson that the Babylonians kept their accounts using a system of numbers and symbols. And this is exactly what we see here. Here is a receipt for a payment of 48 shekels of silver. Here is another one for 75 shekels. And here is a receipt for 18 shekels. I wonder what these payments were for. What do you think? Perhaps someone had bought a donkey. Or maybe some building materials. I don't know. Here is one final group of tablets that I would like to show you. At first glance, they might look like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, but if you look closely, you will see that they are covered with writing. They are not receipts, nor are they pieces of an advertisement. They are legal documents. Let me explain. If a person died without leaving a will, then their property had to be divided according to the laws of inheritance. And those laws stated that the eldest son received a double share. This is called the double portion law, and these tablets tell us that this law was strictly enforced. Just look at this one. To Nabu, son of Sin-Marduk, 1/6 of the estate of his father, Sin-Marduk, who died without a will. To Amu, son of Sin-Marduk, 1/3 of the estate of his father. To Abi, son of Sin-Marduk, 1/6 of the estate of his father. To Marduk, son of Sin-Marduk, 1/6 of the estate of his father. To Iddah, daughter of Sin-Marduk, 1/3 of the estate of his father. Did you get that? The two sons each got 1/3 of the estate, and the daughter got 1/6. That may not sound like much, but back in those days, women's inheritance was often much smaller than that. So as I said, this was a very egalitarian law. Oh, but wait, here is one last receipt, and it seems that it is for a purchase made by a certain king. Who could that be? Why, it's none other than Hammurabi himself. Yes, that very famous lawmaker and founder of the Second Babylonian Empire. This receipt is for some building materials, stone and wood. I wonder what he was building. Perhaps he was adding another wing to his palace. Well, that brings to a close our third lesson in deciphering cuneiform. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, then please remember to hit that subscribe button. I am counting on your support, and I need it desperately. So won't you please come to the rescue? Please do it now. Thank you. Bye-bye. Well, I think this particular piece of clay is the very first example we have of graffiti. So, in front of you is a collection of some 25 or so cuneiform tablets that were found in the late 19th century by an excavator named John Marshall. They were found inside a small building, which dates back to about 1800 BCE. The building itself was discovered at the ancient Mesopotamian site of Nippur, which lies in modern-day Iraq. We don't know exactly what this structure was used for. It may have been a storehouse, maybe a temple, but what we do know from the clay tablets found inside is that it was likely full of scribes and administrative personnel. And that's because these clay tablets are primarily receipts, lists, and other documents related to the trade of grain. And they're written in a type of cuneiform script known as Old Babylonian. Now, many of these tablets are stamped with official seals. So unlike some of the thousands of other cuneiform tablets that have been found at Nippur and other sites across ancient Mesopotamia, these tablets were not free for anyone to write on. They were official documents, and yet amongst them, there is one tablet that is different from all the others. There's something about it that makes it stand out, and that is this. Have a close look at this. Do you see anything unusual? Anything peculiar? Maybe you have noticed that this tablet has writing on both sides. Now that isn't particularly strange. Some of the other tablets also have writing on both sides, but have another close look. Look closely at these characters right here. These three characters, they form a personal name. But look where they are. They're upside down. That's because this tablet was originally wedged between two other tablets, like a sandwich. And it was pressed into the clay when no one was looking. The boy added, "Ninshuber is a donkey." Now, we can be reasonably sure it was a boy who did this, because these kinds of childish pranks aren't recorded anywhere else in the archaeological record from ancient Mesopotamia. And I should point out that it wasn't uncommon to make fun of people's names. This is well documented in the ancient texts. You may even remember the biblical story of King David and how he was mocked by the Philistine warrior Goliath. Goliath called David a little boy and mocked him for coming up against him with only a staff and some stones. So to call someone a name would often involve mocking them, calling them something that was somehow less than human. And so what was Ninshuber's crime? Why was he being made fun of in this way? Well, his name means Lady of the Mountain. And apparently, she was either a bit of a snob or stuck up her own ass or something. She was unpopular. And just like students today might vandalize the desk of a teacher they don't like, so too did these students mock Ninshuber, except instead of carving their insults into the desk, they pressed them into the clay tablets that surrounded him. This particular piece of clay is the very first example we have of graffiti. Now, let's move forward about 4,000 years. A few hundred miles to the north and west, we find ourselves in the British Museum in London. This is a much more comfortable environment than the stuffy, dark rooms of the museum in Berlin where we started. And the air conditioning is humming softly. Now we go inside to the high priest's inner sanctum for our next segment. And there's something very interesting that I want to point out before we do so. If we look at the upper left-hand corner of your screen right now, we can see the ziggurat itself slowly being consumed by darkness. Daylight is fading fast. The sun is setting behind those mountains in the distance. And soon the high priest will be making his way up to the top of this ziggurat to carry out his dark rituals. We've just heard the crunch of his sandals on the stone stairs leading up to the temple. We can hear the flapping of his robe. He makes his way up, and he pauses momentarily, and then the sound of his sandals once again upon the stone stairs. He's nearly there. His sandals make one final noise, and then silence. That was the last we will hear from the old high priest as he makes his way into the temple. The entrance to the temple is sealed shut. It seems like nobody has come through here for many, many years. But miraculously, it is opening up to allow the high priest passage. It is groaning open. And yes, he did have to use some brute strength to actually force this thing open because it has been sealed shut for so long. But now the seal is broken, and the high priest is making his way through to the other side. Here we are inside the temple. Now we can see all these beautiful columns around us. This is the high priest's inner sanctum. No other priests or acolytes are allowed to enter this area. Only the high priest himself. And he uses this place for meditation and communing with the gods. And of course, it is here that he will sacrifice his virgins and offer them up to his dark gods. But let's not dwell on that too much. Let's take our time and enjoy the surroundings. This is a truly magnificent chamber. These columns reach all the way up to the ceiling, and they seem to disappear into the darkness above. I wonder if there are any traps or secret passages hidden among these columns. Perhaps the high priest keeps his prisoners in some of these chambers. I don't know. Maybe we'll find out soon enough. Okay, so the high priest is taking off his outer robes and laying them across the floor. Here he keeps a small fire burning. It is just large enough to keep him warm and cast some light around the room. There are some strange symbols carved into the wall nearby, and the high priest seems fascinated by them. He runs his fingers across them and traces their lines and curves. I wonder what secrets these symbols hold. What could they possibly mean? I don't know. But if we could decipher them, perhaps we would learn more about the inner workings of this cult. Alright, so the high priest is going over to a shelf and picking up a small knife. He takes a deep breath and then begins sharpening the blade on a whetstone. The knife is made from flint and was brought back from a distant mountain range. Only the finest materials were used in the construction of this weapon. It gleams in the firelight and seems almost alive in the old high priest's hands. He moves the knife closer to the flame, probably warming it up to make it more flexible. Knives made from flint are known for their sharpness and durability. They can hold an edge for a very long time and are incredibly difficult to break. A knock sounds from somewhere in the temple. It was barely audible, but the high priest seemed to start at the sound. He quickly hides his knife behind his back and turns to face the door. I wonder who could be out there. Could it be one of the cultists come to bring their sacrifices? Or perhaps it is one of the guards. I don't know. But whatever it is, it seems the high priest does not want to be caught with his knife. The old high priest nervously shuffles towards the exit. He steps over his robes and makes his way to the door. He places his ear to the cold stone and listens intently. Whatever was out there has gone away. The high priest lets out a shaky breath and slowly opens the door. He looks out into the darkness beyond and then closes the door and leans against it. He seems troubled and is biting his fingernails. I wonder what was out there. Was it just his imagination? Oh, look at that. A small sheep has wandered into the courtyard outside. The high priest seems to be watching it intently and seems quite pleased with its arrival. He walks over to a nearby table and picks up a small wooden bowl filled with what looks like grain. He walks out into the courtyard to feed the animal. Ah, that's why he wasn't worried. It was just a stray animal. I thought maybe there was someone out there trying to sneak into his chamber. But no, just a harmless sheep. The high priest returns to the safety of his inner sanctum and pours himself a cup of wine. He takes a seat on the floor and begins to drink. He seems much more relaxed now that whatever was out there has gone away. He takes another swig of his wine and then begins humming a strange tuneless song. He closes his eyes and rocks back and forth. Seems to be enjoying his wine and reliving some pleasant memory. Wait, what's that? The high priest suddenly stops singing and his eyes snap open. He looks around the room frantically and then rushes to the door. He throws it open and steps out into the hallway. The cultists are coming. Their footsteps can be heard echoing down the hallway towards his chamber. They are getting closer and closer. The high priest quickly shuts the door and tries to hide the evidence of his wine drinking. He pulls his robes back over the bowl and hides it from view. The cultists are almost there. I wonder what they have brought for their evening sacrifice. The high priest nervously adjusts his necklace and tries to calm his breathing. The doorknob begins to turn and the door swings open. The cultists file in and kneel before their high priest. They are all wearing robes and carrying knives. Their faces are painted with strange symbols. The high priest gestures for them to stand, and they rise to their feet. They form a circle around the high priest and begin chanting in unison. Their voices echo around the chamber, and their chants seem to grow in intensity. Suddenly, A sheep bleats from somewhere outside the temple. The cultists fall silent and turn to face the high priest. He nods his head slowly, and the cultists resume their chanting. One of the cultists steps forward and presents the high priest with a knife. It is a ceremonial dagger with a silver blade and a handle wrapped in leather. The high priest takes the knife and examines it closely. He seems satisfied with its sharpness and hesitates for a moment longer before turning to face the cultist. Behind him, the other cultists watch intently. With a swift and practiced motion, the high priest plunges the knife into the chest of the cultist. Blood spurts from the wound, and the cultist cries out in pain. The other cultists gasp and step back in surprise. The high priest pulls the knife out of the cultist's chest and holds it aloft. Blood drips from the tip of the blade, and the cultist collapses to the ground, his chest heaving as he struggles to breathe. The high priest looks down at the dying cultist, and a cruel smile spreads across his face. He turns back to the other cultists and raises his knife high above his head. Tonight, he shouts, "We feast in the name of the dark gods." The cultists cheer and raise their own knives in the air. The high priest leads them in a chant, their voices echoing around the chamber. The dying cultist watches them with wide eyes and a weak smile on his face. So there you have it, the fourth segment of the descent into Avernus adventure. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you found it useful. If you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing for more content. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. The high priest had just finished his ablutions, and he was making his way through the many winding corridors of the temple complex. This was his favorite part of the day. He liked to take this walk slowly, savoring the peace that came over the temple as the sun began its slow descent towards the horizon. It was during these twilight hours that the high priest would have his most profound thoughts, and he could never quite explain why this was the case. But as he turned the corner into the main hall, all thought left his mind as he realized what stood before him. At the center of the room, bathed in the warm glow of over 1,000 oil lamps, was the statue of the one true God, the one who had brought order to their world. In his hands, he held the staff of life and the ankh of immortality. And around his shoulders were two sphinxes, each representing wisdom and courage, the two pillars that help us mortals along our journey through life. And yet the high priest had never noticed their presence so much before. And then there were the eyes. They were made from the finest lapis lazuli, the deep blue stone that only came from the mountains to the north. Their depth seemed to be calling out to him, demanding his attention. And so he did the only thing he could think to do. He removed the ceremonial dagger from his belt, and he walked towards the statue. With each step, the eye seemed to grow larger, consuming his vision. And when he reached the platform in front of it, he fell to his knees. He felt overcome with emotion, with devotion, with a sense of purpose. He looked up at the statue, and he saw the smile upon the god's face. A smile that seemed to say, "You are my chosen one. You are the link between me and humanity. You are the one who will keep my light shining in the darkness." And the high priest knew that he was not worthy of such an honor, but he accepted it nonetheless. For he was the high priest, and it was his duty to serve the one true God. Slowly, reverently, he began to anoint the statue with precious oils. Each stroke was prescribed by the ancient texts, passed down from priest to priest since before kings ruled the land. He worked his way from the top of the head to the toes, making sure to cover every inch of the statue. He used the finest myrrh, frankincense, and cinnamon oils, the very same ones that were used in the sacred ceremonies. As he poured the oils onto the statue, he prayed to the one true God, asking for his blessings upon the people, asking for guidance in his service, and asking for the strength to carry out his duties. Each drop of oil seemed to be a prayer, each stroke a hymn of praise. And as the last drop was applied to the tip of the god's staff, the high priest looked up and saw the two sphinxes watching him intently. They seemed to be studying his every move, judging his every action. And he felt their wisdom and their courage flowing into him, filling him with power. Then he took a step back and looked at the statue. He had never seen it so resplendent, so lifelike. It seemed to glow with 1,000 lights, and the lapis eyes glittered like stars in the night sky. And then, and only then, did he notice it. The mouth of the statue seemed to be wet, as if someone had just offered the god a cup of fresh milk. But how could this be? No one had entered the inner sanctum for weeks. The priests were not allowed to enter unless summoned by the high priest himself. And even then, they were only permitted to come into the main hall. No one was allowed beyond this point, not even the king. So who had been here, and who had offered the milk? The high priest searched the room, but found no one. There was no sign of an entrance, no indication of any intrusion. And yet there was the milk, fresh and sweet, glistening on the lips of the statue. Was it a trick of the lamplight? Had the flickering flames played a trick on his eyes? Or was there really someone else in the temple? Someone who had managed to sneak past the guards and enter the inner sanctum? He wanted to dismiss it as mere trickery, but something inside him, some deep, primal instinct, told him that this was no illusion. Someone had been here, and then he remembered the words of the oracle. The one true God is always with us, though we may not always see him. He can be found in the smallest of places, in the most unexpected of moments. Could this be one of those moments? Could the God himself have come to him in the form of milk? The high priest wasn't sure what to make of it. On one hand, he was a man of logic and reason. He understood the world based on what he could see, touch, and hear. And he could not comprehend how the God could appear in the form of milk. On the other hand, he was also a man of faith. He believed in the one true God, and he trusted that the oracle's words were true. He couldn't shake the feeling that something profound had happened. He knew that he should probably tell someone, perhaps the chief guard or the king himself. But he hesitated. What would they say? That the high priest had lost his mind? That he was seeing things that weren't there? Would they mock him, or worse, would they try to take away his position? He didn't want to risk it, so the high priest kept the incident to himself. He continued his prayers and his rituals as if nothing had happened. But he never forgot about the milk on the statue's lips. Every time he entered the temple, he would look for any signs of a new offering, but none ever came. Still, he never stopped believing that the one true God had visited him in the form of milk. And that gave him strength in his darkest hours. In the quiet of the night, when the city was fast asleep, the high priest would sneak into the temple. He would light the lamps and he would sit before the statue, lost in thought. Sometimes he would talk to the statue, sharing his hopes and dreams for the future. He told the statue about the evil sorcerer who was stirring unrest in the kingdom, about the drought that was plaguing the land, and about the sickness that was taking many lives. And as he spoke, he felt a sense of calm wash over him. He knew that the one true God was listening, that he cared about their troubles, and that he would help them if they just had faith. Many nights passed, and the high priest continued his vigil. He never lost hope that the one true God would speak to him again, that he would guide him and protect him. But as the days grew longer and the sun hung higher in the sky, the high priest began to feel a change within himself. He was growing weaker, more tired, his steps were slower, and his head was often filled with thoughts of death. He knew that his time was running out, that his end was near. One evening, as the sun was setting, the high priest made his way to the temple. It was his last journey. He could feel death's icy fingers upon him, pulling him closer, urging him forward. But he did not fear death. He had lived a long life, and he had served the one true God faithfully. Now it was time to join the gods in the afterlife. As he entered the main hall, he saw the statue in all its glory. The lapis eyes seemed to shine brighter than ever before, and the smile upon the lips seemed wider, more inviting. And there was the milk, fresh and sweet, glistening on the statue's tongue. The high priest felt a surge of joy and peace wash over him. He knew that this was where he was meant to be, that this was where he would spend his final moments. He fell to his knees before the statue, and he closed his eyes. He could hear the chanting of priests echoing through the hall. He could see the faces of his fellow worshippers, their eyes filled with devotion and love. He could feel the warmth of the oil lamps on his skin and the coolness of the marble floor beneath him. We have seen how Menes, ruler of the city of Ishnana in ancient Mesopotamia, was visited by Enki, the god of wisdom and magic. As promised in our last episode, we will conclude our retelling of this fascinating tale today. But before we do, let me remind you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already so that you don't miss any new videos. When Menes awoke, the first thing he saw was a magnificent garden unlike anything he had ever witnessed before. There were trees laden with fruit, flowers of every color imaginable, and animals of all shapes and sizes roaming freely. In the center of the garden was a river made of milk and honey. And beyond the garden, Menes could hear the sound of singing and drums. He couldn't believe his eyes. It was as if he had entered the very gates of paradise. As he explored the garden, Menes noticed some strange plants. They had leaves that looked like human hands, reaching out towards the sky, and flowers that resembled human faces. Intrigued, he reached out to touch one of the flowers, and suddenly it began to speak. "Don't touch us," the plant warned. "If you do, we will curse you." Menes, taken aback by the talking flower, quickly pulled his hand away. Was this paradise really a cursed place? He wondered. He continued exploring until he came across a pool of water surrounded by lush vegetation. As he approached, he saw a beautiful woman bathing in the pool. She had long flowing hair, delicate features, and skin that glowed like gold. Startled by her beauty, Menes hid behind some nearby bushes, and the woman emerged from the water. Seeing no one, she called out, "Who's there?" Startled, Menes remained silent, and the woman continued to call out, "If you're hiding, "Come out and show yourself." Realizing that she wouldn't harm him, Meanie stepped out from his hiding place and introduced himself. The woman, pleased to have a visitor, invited him to join her for a bath in the pool. Together they relaxed in the warm water and talked for hours. The woman told Meanies about the magical powers of the garden and warned him not to eat the fruit of the knowledge tree, lest he forget his humble origins. Meanwhile, the mysterious boat carrying the priest Utu and his companions had reached a huge lake filled with sweet-smelling lotus blossoms. The boat was decorated with precious stones and metals, and a golden throne awaited Utu on the opposite bank. Suddenly, giant fish jumped out of the lake and carried the boat to the shore, where a group of men dressed in white robes stood waiting to greet them. These men were priests from a secret cult dedicated to the worship of the gods. They welcomed Utnapishtim and his companions, prostrating themselves before them and inviting them to share in the fruits of their rituals. After resting and enjoying the offerings of the priests, Utnapishtim learned that they had been traveling for 7 days and nights without realizing it, a testament to the power of the gods to alter the perception of time. Impressed by what he had witnessed, Utnapishtim decided to stay and learn more about the cult's teachings. Utnapishtim became the leader of the cult, teaching its members the secrets of immortality and sharing his knowledge with those who sought it. He lived among them for many years, enjoying their devotion and respect until he grew weary of his immortal existence. One day, he decided to end his life. He asked for a clay tablet and wrote down the names of all the gods, both good and evil, then drowned himself in the depths of the lake. As he descended, he shouted, "I am the servant of the gods, and to them I return." The priest watched in awe as Utnapishtim disappeared into the water, knowing that they would never see him again. After Utnapishtim's death, the cult continued to thrive, preserving his teachings and spreading his wisdom to those who were worthy. Their rituals became even more elaborate, and their devotion to the gods reached new heights. The priests revered Utnapishtim as a martyr who had sacrificed himself for the sake of knowledge, and they continued to honor him long after he was gone. Back in the garden, Meanie spent many happy hours with the beautiful woman who had warned him about the fruit of the knowledge tree. But as the days turned into weeks, he began to feel a strange restlessness growing inside him. He missed his old life in the city and the familiar sights and sounds of his home. One day, the woman noticed that Meanies was no longer his carefree self, and she asked him what was bothering him. Meanies confessed his longing for his home, and the woman understood that it was time for him to return. She prepared a feast for him, and then led him to a nearby grove, where a golden boat awaited. "This boat," she said, "will take you home. But remember what I have told you, and do not eat the fruit of the knowledge tree, lest you forget your humble origins." Meanies thanked the woman for her hospitality and for showing him the wonders of the garden. He promised to never forget her, and then got into the boat. With a wave of her hand, the woman disappeared, and the boat began to move. Meanies found himself sailing down a winding river, surrounded by lush vegetation. As he journeyed, he saw all kinds of exotic animals and plants that he had never seen before. The river seemed to go on forever, but eventually it opened up into a vast ocean. In the distance, he could see the familiar outline of his city. With a mixture of excitement and sadness, Meanie steered the boat towards the shore, knowing that he was leaving paradise behind forever. As the boat touched down on the shore, Meanie stepped out and looked back at the garden one last time. It was a place of beauty and wonder that he would never forget. With a heavy heart, he turned away and began the long walk back to his city. Along the way, he met other travelers who had also been lost in the wilderness. They were glad to see him and eager to hear about his adventures. Menes shared his story with them and warned them about the dangers of the wilderness, but also about the beauty and wonder that could be found there if one knew where to look. He realized that he had a gift for storytelling and that he could use it to help others find their way. So when he finally reached his city, he didn't just return to his old life, he became a guide for others, helping them to find their way out of the wilderness and back to civilization. His stories of the fantastic land he had discovered inspired people to explore the world around them and to never lose their sense of wonder. And so the tale of Menes, the man who found the Garden of Eden, was passed down through generations, becoming a legend that inspired explorers and dreamers for centuries to come. And as for the priestess who had helped him on his journey, Menes never forgot her. He named his firstborn daughter after her and built a temple in her honor. And though he never saw the garden again, he carried the memory of it in his heart until his dying day. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. You can also follow me on social media to get updates on new videos. Until next time, there is only this breath, there is only this darkness. There is only this perfect safety of being here. There is only this moment, there is only now. And as we sit here in this darkness together, I want you to take this time to reflect on all that we have learned, all that we have experienced, all that we have shared in this community of practice. I want you to think about how you came into this practice and where you are now. Think about your life, your relationships, your work, your creativity, your spirituality, your connection to the natural world. Think about all the ways that this practice has positively impacted your life. And if you're new to this practice, I invite you to open yourself up to all the possibilities that are here for you. As we come to the end of our formal practice together, I want you to know that you can continue to go deeper with this practice. You can continue to experience all the benefits that come from this daily practice. And you can do it on your own. You can do it in a group. You can do it in nature. You can do it anywhere. You can do it anytime. I want you to know that there are many different paths that lead to the same destination. The destination is peace. The destination is love. The destination is connection. The destination is creativity. The destination is aliveness, and there are many different paths that lead to these destinations. So if something resonates with you, if something calls to you, if something lights you up, then explore that, go down that path and see where it leads. I want you to know that this practice will be here for you always. No matter what challenges or difficulties you face, no matter what joys or celebrations you experience, this practice will be here for you. It will be waiting for you, and all you have to do is show up. All you have to do is breathe. All you have to do is be present. I want you to know that you are capable of so much more than you think. You are capable of creating the life that you want. You are capable of experiencing the peace that you seek. You are capable of making a difference in this world. And all it takes is one breath, one step at a time. Don't try to do it all at once. Don't try to force it. Just take one breath, one step at a time. As we come to the end of our time together, I want you to know that I am grateful for you. I am grateful for your presence. I am grateful for your willingness to be here, to be vulnerable, to be open, to be honest, to be authentic. I am grateful for who you are, for who you were, for who you will become. And I want you to know that I believe in you. I believe in your ability to heal. I believe in your ability to grow. I believe in your ability to thrive. I believe in your ability to make a difference in this world. And I want you to know that I love you. I love you for who you are, for who you were, for who you will become. And if you are able to love yourself, then nothing in this world can stop you from experiencing the life that you desire. If you are able to be present with yourself, then nothing in this world can stop you from experiencing the joy that is available to you. If you are able to breathe, then nothing in this world can stop you from experiencing the peace that is within your reach. There is only this breath. There is only this darkness. There is only this perfect safety of being here. There is only this moment. There is only now.